So what does it really mean to be an ambassador for Jesus? Let's go ahead and dive on into the passage that talks about this specifically on today's Bible Byte. I'm Russell Baker. This is the Great Commission Alliance Media Channel. Thanks for tuning in. So the passage that we're going to dive into today is 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 20. Therefore we are ambassadors for Christ, God making his appeal through us. We implore you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. Now, obviously the first thing that we're going to look at is that first section. We are ambassadors for Christ. It's important to understand what an ambassador is and what that means for us as believers. If we look at the generic or the governmental definition, like an ambassador is an accredited diplomat sent by a country as its official representative to a foreign country. Now that's the, maybe the Oxford, that's the Google Dictionary version of this. But in the midst of this, the ambassador is a representative from an entity or a representative of one thing or one concept or one person to anything that's not that representative or country or person. And so when we're representatives of Christ, when we're ambassadors of Christ, we're representing him and his kingdom to the world around us. And that's a call for every believer. We see this before that we see this in the verses before verse 20, that God is the one that reconciled us to him and made us ministers of this reconciliation. So he both reconciled us and then gave us the role of ambassador in this ministry. And so that's for anybody that believes at the moment that they believe in Jesus. Because we look at even just before then, everyone that's in Christ is a new creation. The old is gone and the new has come. It's like your old resume that said you weren't qualified for this position of ambassadorship. That's in the shredder. Here's Jesus's resume. God's looking at us through Jesus's work on the cross. And through his work, we are qualified for this role as an ambassador. And that should give us a moment of pause. We see this in the second aspect of verse 20, where it's God is making his appeal to this world through us, through our brokenness. It's no surprise looking around to see Christians or people that call themselves Christians that are not representing Christ well, whether that's intentionally or unintentionally, whether they're aware of it in the moment or not aware of it in the moment. And the reality of it is it should give us pause that God does use broken people to carry out his ministry of reconciliation to the world. That he shares this mission with us. We may make mistakes, but again, God looks at who we are through Jesus' death on the cross. And it's actually through our mistakes that it shows that God is who he says he is and that we're not. And when we acknowledge our brokenness and when we rest in the identity that he's given us as his children, when we rest in that identity of a new creation in Christ, we will walk according to his ways in a way that is glorifying to God and representing Christ well to the world. And when we don't, it's important that we go back to him and we recognize who we are in Jesus and understand that he's much bigger than our brokenness, even in that circumstance. The important part about this too is that we see that our intention as ambassadors should be, as Paul mentions in the last half of this verse, we implore you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. It's not to me. It's not to your pastor, your church, your denomination, even just the whole body of Christianity as a whole. The fact of the matter is, we are reconciled to God. Even as we don't represent Christ well, the fact is he represents himself well. He represents himself through his word. He represents himself through creation. And when people are walking in step with Jesus, he represents himself through his body. And he does so in a way that is life-changing. And so we should not point to ourselves as anything special, but always be as ambassadors of Christ, pointing to God as the one who redeemed us and saved us and continues to save us in the midst of our brokenness and redeem us in the midst of our brokenness and redeem our mission. He's the one that does this work. He's the one that did the work of reconciliation, and he's the one that will ultimately bring all those who trust in him into his future kingdom, which we are proclaiming now as his ambassadors. All right, so thanks for tuning in. Look forward to seeing you guys again soon.